Well, hello, free people of the Rocky Mountain region. This is Brandon from Free State, Colorado, and I hope you're doing well. Well, if you've been following any of our Democratic legislators on social media or their compliant news media companies, then you'd think the world is ending here in Colorado due to the new budget cut that is facing our state government. Because of the one big, beautiful bill, Colorado legislators will have to have a special session to reconvene and figure out how to cut $1 billion out of our state budget. Now, don't get me wrong, $1 billion is a lot of money, but it's definitely not the end of the world, and it's actually a good thing, and I'm going to explain why here. So take a look at here is Julie McCluskey crying here in this thumbnail from the Denver Post saying Colorado lawmakers must close new budget gap, reaching nearly $1 billion caused by Trump tax bill. It's from July 30th, 2025. You know, and that's right. There's nothing wrong with that headline except kind of the way they present things, as you might expect from the Denver Post. But nonetheless, what they're not telling you right off the bat here is that this is $1 billion tax cut. This is $1 billion going back to the private economy here in Colorado. That's Colorado business owners, it's Colorado corporations, Coloradans in general who are paying income tax, which is the vast majority of us, as far as I know, are going to save money. $1 billion returned to taxpayers is a good thing. It's a necessary thing. It's something we should be celebrating. But of course, none of these media companies paint the picture that way. But, we really need this money back in our private economy. Here's from the CPR from July 1st. Business confidence in Colorado in very, very pessimistic territory. Our state government is doing a terrible job making this a very hostile climate for businesses, and giving back $1 billion to the people of Colorado from this federal bill is going to be great for this businesses and business confidence. Here's from Colorado Biz from July 2nd. Colorado struggles to keep pace in the Mountain West economy. And that's true. Colorado has been sluggish in our economic output, and it's not looking great for a lot of people out there. A lot of people here in Colorado are struggling to make ends meet, living paycheck to paycheck, and these greedy politicians are complaining that they're going to lose $1 billion of our money. It is our money, folks. Colorado House Democrats, I mean, I had to laugh at this, folks. July 30th, their little tweet thread here. There was an executive committee hearing where legislative staff presented kind of the budget outlook and really laid it out as to why Colorado's going to lose so much money. We'll look at that here in a second. But just had to laugh at their graphics here, especially they're pointing out about the no Tabor refunds. I mean, are you kidding me? It's in the Colorado Democratic Party platform to repeal Tabor, our Taxpayers' Bill of Rights. It's Tabor we have to defend as much as we possibly can. It's one of the most valuable things we have here in Colorado. And of course, now the Democrats in the state government are saying, "Oh, but you're not going to get your Tabor refund back." Even though we've been doing everything possible to keep that money, but look at what Trump's doing. He's not letting you get that money back. And you know why we're not going to get a Tabor refund from this? Well, there's a few reasons, but one of the reasons is because they're going to be collecting less tax money. They're going to be collecting less tax money, so there's less money for a Tabor refund. Now, our Tabor refund should be a lot higher, and I'm going to talk about that in a future video. But just for this, I had to laugh at this one. This is Colorado House Democrats on July 30th saying Coloradans can't afford GOP budget cuts and increased costs. Folks, we can't afford to live in one of the most expensive states in the country. We can't afford to pay our high property taxes, the sales taxes that they keep asking to increase every year, this ridiculous cost of living. Our state is so unaffordable, and these Democrats are saying that $1 billion tax cut means we can't afford living here. It's insane. And it's so upsetting because you see the news media really going along with these talking points, of course. Here's Speaker Julie McCluskey there on July 31st saying a difficult day, talking about a difficult future. And then she's talking about this article here. This is an excellent overview of the devastating impacts from the GOP budget bill. Well, sure, it is devastating to a bloated state government that has too many employees and has too much of our money. The article she's quote tweeting here from Ed C. Lover says, just observe the looks on the faces of James Coleman, and Julie McCluskey in this photo, and you'll understand how Democratic Colorado legislator leaders feel about the current state of the budget. Read the story to learn what they can do. And yeah, they're upset. They're not happy about it because all their little special projects, their little special interest buddies that they're giving our money to aren't gonna have $1 billion to play with. And that is a good thing, folks. But of course, you wouldn't know that from reading the Colorado Sun. Colorado lawmakers must cut $1 billion from state's current budget because of the GOP federal tax and spending bill. And you have to really read down further along the article to understand that it's because it's a tax cut. That's why. Here's the center square, which is supposed to be a little bit more moderate. Colorado faces $1 billion budget deficit in wake of big, beautiful bill. And they do mention it here, but they lead. They got to lead with little Jared Polis's little spokesperson here. Check this out. The numbers don't lie. And this new federal law is already ripping a massive hole in our current year's budget and creating tens of millions of dollars in ongoing funding obligations to the state. Eric Mariamaya, spokesperson for Governor Jared Polis's office, has told the Center Square. But then if you keep reading down here, they say, oh, well, it's actually less tax revenue because it's a massive tax cut. Colorado Newsline, highly recommend you stay away from Colorado Newsline, is a propaganda outlet for the Democratic Party, 100% in my opinion. And they say Colorado state budget faces $1 billion shortfall in wake of Republicans' federal policy bill. Budget official from governor's office expressed a sense of urgency during presentation to lawmakers. The sky is falling. It's a horrible situation. The whole government's going bankrupt. And well, good, because this is $1 billion that's going to end up in the pockets of Coloradans that they can spend, they can invest, and they can create the future. And that's what needs to happen. Here's from Denver 7. Colorado faces new $1.2 billion budget shortfall. No money to pay our bills. Oh my gosh, that's crazy. Now imagine if we had a news media organization out there in Colorado that actually was on the side of taxpayers and said Colorado faces $1.2 billion in tax breaks, $1.2 billion injection into our economy from our money that we earned. That would be that would be great. Unfortunately, we don't see that. And then 9 News, I never share articles from 9 News just because the bias is so out of control. But of course, here, Colorado budget faces $1 billion shortfall due to federal tax changes. Well, at least they didn't mention the Republicans in the top, but there you go, folks. Here's Marianne Goodland at coloradopolitics.com. Colorado budget faces $1 billion shortfall. Analysts say it's due to federal tax overhaul. Yeah, that's true. I mean, I guess that's trying to be a little unbiased there. But you can actually read the documents yourself. We don't have to take the words of our state legislators, which we shouldn't, right? We shouldn't necessarily trust what they have to say. So you can actually go to the Colorado State Government's website, leg.colorado.gov, links, of course, at freestatecolorado.com, and really read this for yourself and see what you think. But this is that memorandum, 34 pages long. They have slides, they have all the notes from their presentation that they give to the legislators, and that's what the media is basing their reporting on. So, I really encourage people, do your own research, do your own digging. But there's some interesting stuff in here I just wanted to briefly point out here. Um, Starting here at page 2, it says State Revenue Impacts of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. The passage of the OBA, I'm just going to call it that, which was signed into law on July 4th, is expected to decrease Colorado's state income tax revenue beginning in fiscal year 25-26. Well, there you go. Why didn't any of those news media headlines lead with that? The bill represents the most significant change to federal income tax policy since the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, TCJA, in 2017. With over 100 tax provisions alone, the OBA is expected to affect both individual and corporate income tax revenue, particularly in the current fiscal year, although other revenue streams such as insurance premium tax revenue may be indirectly impacted. The following provides a summary of the estimated impacts of the OBA, as well as a discussion of the methodology used to prepare these estimates, an overview of how Colorado income taxes are calculated, and a summary of key OBA provisions impacting individual and business income taxes. So you can read through this. There's a lot of information there, but you can see here's that $1.2 billion decrease here in this fiscal year. And then it's still 700, 700, 600. I mean, that's awesome. People who understand how economics works, understand how the economy grows, how having more money for spenders, consumers, producers, people who are going to invest it into our communities is a good thing. Can't be anything other than excited about this. So you see the change here in individual income tax as well as corporate income tax, and that's in millions of dollars. So that's $843 million. 843 million. It's hard to even wrap my head around how much money that is going back to people who live and work here in Colorado. Corporate income tax, 336 million. Lots of money, folks. Really, really good stuff. Thought this was interesting here too. The impacts of the OBA on Colorado's income tax revenue may be larger as a share of total state revenue than that for many other states because Colorado's state tax base begins with federal taxable income. Now, this is one of the worries I have that our state legislators, these greedy politicians, are going to try and change how our taxes are calculated. So other states, most states, with an income tax instead use federal adjusted gross income as a starting point. The OBA impacts on federal taxable income are much greater than those for adjusted gross income. So interesting, something to pay attention to there. Won't get too in depth on that, but something we got to be looking out for as well. We have to stop any tax increases dead in their tracks, and thankfully we do have the Taxpayers Bill of Rights Tabor to help with that. So looking here at page 9 of this document, I'm not going to spend a ton of time here, but I think it is pretty interesting. You can see some of the changes here about how taxes are calculated here in Colorado, what is deductible, the AGI, they call it the federal adjusted gross income, and how that is calculated in terms of Colorado state income tax. But they actually have a little graph here on page 10, which I thought was kind of interesting. So the feds, they calculate your tax, your gross income, minus your above the line deductions. That's your AGI, your adjusted gross income. Then you subtract out your itemized or standard deductions, which now the standard deduction is going to increase, thankfully. Then the qualified business income deduction, and that's your federal taxable income. Now that number is where Colorado starts. And that's how it should be, right? I mean, it's like, hey, the feds are already taking all of this money out of us. Let's go off what that number is at the end. I think that's a good thing, but I'm worried they're going to try and change it to gross income, just to not to repeat myself too much there. And then we have some state additions and state subtractions. The state additions part should upset everybody here in Colorado because now your overtime will be taxed at the state level and not the federal level, thanks to our Democratic legislators. And that gives you your Colorado taxable income, which is then multiplied by the tax rate, which has decreased in recent years because of Tabor. Thankfully, everybody last year paid less taxes because of it. And then your tax credits, and that equals what you owe. So interesting stuff there for sure. Moving on just slightly here. Individual income tax collections are the largest single source of revenue to the state and account for about 53% of revenue to the general fund. The OBA provisions with the largest individual income tax impacts are discussed below. So, if you didn't know that, 53% of the revenue for the general fund in our state government is coming out of our wallets. And that is extremely upsetting for sure. We work so hard, spend so much time away from our families, delay retirement, delay vacations, delay investing in our own lives because we have to pay off these greedy politicians. And obviously, we know what happens if you don't pay your taxes. It's not a good situation. But one last thing I did want to cover in here is just so you could see this general fund revenue on page 16 here of the PDF, and actually, yeah, page 16. But the general fund revenue, how much it's increased. I don't know about you, but 2015 doesn't seem that long ago to me. But in 2015, our was $9.8 billion. Not that long ago, right? Now, don't get me wrong, we've had a lot of people move to Colorado, but at the same time, now they're at $18 billion in general fund revenue. That's insane. And our state government can't manage their wallet, can't manage their budget, can't balance the budget, can't find ways to make cuts. They dang sure better. I mean, if we're going on 10 years, going from $10 billion, let's just round it up to $18 billion in 10 years, that's a heck of a lot of money, folks. That's doubling the amount of money they have to play with. And I hate to say that, but that's the reality of it because so little of it actually goes towards things that actually benefit us. So nonetheless, thought that was interesting. Really wanted to share that with you. These documents are so important to read because you can understand what happens outside of what the news media and what these politicians are telling you. Now, another interesting related thing is from August 4th, 2024, from ColoradoPolitics.com. Colorado's Tabor exempt revenue, so that's mostly your fees, has increased nearly 30% since 1996, study finds. So not only have they collected record levels of taxes, doubling the amount they're taking for the general fund, but also exempt from Tabor is these fees that they've created here. So you can see it skyrocketing. And because these legislators have figured out ways to circumvent our Taxpayers' Bill of Rights and nickel and dime us for every little thing we have to pay for just to live in Colorado, it's crazy how much money they're taking from us. So the Common Sense Institute has this great report here showing this 30% increase, but it is a lot of money. Check this out here. According to the Common Sense Institute report, 46% of total state spending, about $5,264 per resident, was exempt from Tabor in 1996. By fiscal year 2024, 74% of the state's revenue was exempt from Tabor. 74% of our revenue is exempt from our Taxpayers' Bill of Rights. Crazy. They are taking so much of our money, not just in taxes, but in fees, these enterprise fees, they call them. And it's something I always hammer on and always want to talk about because these greedy politicians are going to be gathering for their special session, complaining to the media, saying they don't have enough of our money. But they have more than enough, folks. Just wanted to end here. A great article from John Caldera over at ColoradoPolitics.com. Of course, linked at Free State Colorado, where this video is at. But interesting stuff here. As the Colorado legislature cries poverty, remember the three taxes. And John's so funny, but this is good stuff here. There are three ways you get taxed. The first way seems transparent: direct taxation and fees. Money's taken out of your paycheck. You see that. You write a check for property taxes, pay sales tax on a cup of coffee. These quote unquote transparent taxes can still be opaque. Renters don't realize they're paying property tax in their rent check. Instead, they just hate their evil landlord. King Soopers, property taxes, and employer taxes are baked into every loaf of bread you buy. Colorado's good at hiding taxes and fees. Like when you are laid up in a hospital, you're charged a bed tax. By law, that fee cannot appear on your hospital bill. Thus, you get angry at the hospital, not your benevolent politicians. The second form of taxation is inflation, caused by the feds uncontrollably printing money. We've been conditioned to think inflation is natural and unavoidable, and government works to keep it in check. The truth is just the opposite. So he goes on and on here, but nonetheless, very important information here about all the ways we're being nickel and dimed. The third truly insidious form of taxation is regulation. Appointed, not elected bureaucrats create regulations for, they claim, our health and safety, but most of it is to protect special interests or engineer behavior. So he goes through this article talking about how much money, how much control they have, how much they're taking from us. So these are important things to know. They're important talking points, I think, when we are talking to our neighbors, our coworkers, and others, especially these elected representatives, and say, folks, you have more money than you've ever had before. You have double the amount of general fund revenue you had 10 years ago. Fees have increased 30%. 74% of the money you collect is not even subject to the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights. And you're saying you're upset that $1 billion is going back into the pockets of hardworking Coloradans? You're upset about that? These legislators need to be put in their place and reminded that they work for us and they're supposed to act in our interests, not their own. Well, we'll talk to you next time.